This episode is brought to you by Roundtable Group, the experts on experts. We've been connecting attorneys with experts for over 30 years. Find out more at roundtablegroup.com.
Welcome to Engaging Experts. I'm your host, Noah Ballmer, and today I'm excited to welcome Ms. Sheila Lowe to the show. Ms. Lowe owns Sheila Lowe and Associates, a handwriting, authentication, and behavioral profiling firm. She's a published author of handwriting analysis books as well as mystery novels. Ms. Lowe holds a master's in psychology from California Coast University. Ms. Lowe, thank you so much for joining me here today.
Thank you, Noah. I'm happy to be here.
Absolutely. Let's jump into it. So you've been a handwriting examiner since, 1967. Tell me a little about your work.
Well, that's when I started studying. I mean, I'm old enough. Don't make me older.
Yes, I'm looking at a person who clearly looks like she's in her 30s, so I wasn't sure how could possibly be the case.
Very, very funny. Yeah, I was 17 when I started studying handwriting.
No kidding.
67. So you can figure that out.
So why handwriting examining, and how did that become expert witness work?
When I was in high school, my boyfriend at the time, mother, had read a book about handwriting analysis and personality, and she analyzed my handwriting, and I was just completely bowled over by the things she told me about my personality. And so I started studying that and got all the books I could find on it. And I did that for about 10 years until I realized that I could actually take courses. And so I did. And then it became an avocation. And in the meantime, I had got married to that guy, the boyfriend, had 3 children, got divorced. And in the mid-'80s, I was working at a job, and then I got fired. And I decided this is a great time to start a business. I had 3 little kids and debt. But in the meantime, it was in 1985 when I was doing personality profiling with handwriting analysis. I got a call from an attorney in Santa Monica, California. And he said he had a case that he said, I need a handwriting expert. And there's a forgery. And I said, well, I don't do that kind of work. I just do personality assessment. And he said, do you know handwriting? I said, well, yes, I've been practicing it for almost 20 years. And he said, well, I'll get you qualified. We're going to court tomorrow. Yeah.
Wow.
Like, what? And I knew nothing about document examination at that time. I mean, I knew handwriting. So
Sure.
I was, dumb enough or arrogant enough, whatever, to say yes. And I immediately called somebody that I knew had done some study in that work. She didn't do the work, but she had books. And so she told me some of the things that I needed to know. And the next day we went to court. And I was on the witness stand in voir dire. And the attorney's partner was the one who was doing the questioning. And he'd asked me some questions that I answered, confidently. And then he said, and so, Ms. Lowe, is there a hierarchy of opinions in document examination? And I said, yes, because I had studied that the night before. And he said, what are they? And I just went, and I turned to the judge. I said, I'm sorry, Your Honor, I've just gone blank. And the judge said, that's okay. It happens to all of us. She's qualified. That was the start.
And so you said that you were, obviously, how prepared could have you possibly been? You had to be on the stand the following day. So I imagine that was quite stressful. Moving forward from there, how did you go about making sure that you have all of the facts and that you're well prepared?
Well, I then took courses and workshops and got mentors, all the really important things. So, the fact was I did know handwriting, and I could compare the question signatures with the exemplars. I wouldn't recommend somebody do that and just come in cold. So it's not like I just didn't know anything, but I didn't know the procedures.
Sure.
And those kinds of things. So I studied a lot.
So when you get a phone call from an attorney, these days now, as an experienced professional, how do you go about vetting? Because, they're vetting you as the expert witness, but you're also vetting them. How do you go about making sure that you are the right person for the particulars of the case that you're being engaged with?
I hear what they need and I determine whether it's something that I want to be involved with or whether I'm qualified for. And if I'm not, I'll refer it to a colleague who may have different kinds of specialized qualifications. But I think the first thing to do is to have a conflict check and make sure that who the parties are. So I think of a colleague who worked on a case and then about a year later got a call from another attorney and accepted the case, did the whole examination, and then discovered by a third party that she was on the other side. So she was giving opinions on both sides. And that's a bad idea. It's pretty embarrassing. So you want to do a conflict check and make sure you're not involved. And the way I do that is I keep a list. I keep a spreadsheet of all of the cases that I take on.
Speaking of conflicts, you've been at this for a while. You have publications behind you on the topic. Do you ever change your mind about anything such that they might try and impeach you on it? In 1974, you wrote that this is the case, but these days, you just said that it's XYZ, not ZYX. How can you explain that? Is that something that you have to keep track of?
Well, my opinions in the case don't usually change unless I think once that I can recall, I received some additional materials and I did change my opinion based on that. But in my reports, I always state that I reserve the right to change my opinion if additional materials are presented to me that,
Yeah.
cause me to change my mind.
Let's talk a little bit about billing and contracts. When you first get your call and you have to go over some of the payment details, do you have any special terms that you like to insert in there? For example, do you like to take a project rate or do you take a retainer? How do you handle billing?
I have a retainer and my retainer, it's different with other document examiners, but I feel comfortable asking for 4 hours and it's a non-refundable retainer. And the reason for that is which an attorney advised me a long, long time ago that, they use my name a lot of times. And sometimes they want to use my name without paying me for it. And they shouldn't do that. And they can often use my name to settle a case. So they should pay something. And so my retainer covers that. And then I have obviously an hourly rate. I have a contract that spells it all out. And naturally, if they're getting work through Roundtable Group, they're not going to worry about that because it's all handled. But for other private clients, it's really important because it shows what you expect from the client and what they can expect from you. And that includes what happens if they don't pay.
You had mentioned settlements. What are your thoughts on an abundance of cases going to settlement these days rather than getting adjudicated before a jury?
It's my feeling that settling is always the goal, and that I've seen people, expert witnesses, advertise on their websites that they have testified in thousands and thousands of cases in a relatively short period of time. And I think that's a bad idea. I want my cases to settle. And I feel like if I had to testify in a whole lot of cases, I probably had not done my job well. And my clients appreciate that.
When you were very first getting started on a new engagement, what are the things that you do in a broader sense to get off on the right foot?
I think one of the first things, one of the really important things is to let them know that I'm not going to be a hired gun. And I'm not going to say it that way necessarily, but I tell them, I want you to understand there's no guarantees that my opinion is going to be what you want it to be. I'm going to do a thorough examination and give you my true opinion. And it's going to be one of three things. It's a genuine signature, it's not genuine, or it's inconclusive, which I really don't like. But in about 20% of the cases, I think I can't give the opinion that the client wants. So I think it's important to have that out of the way up front.
Is it difficult to give a client bad news?
Well, sure. But I find that when I work, and I prefer to work with attorneys, sometimes I work with private people, and I really don't, I like the layer of the attorney between us, so
Sure.
that I don't have to give them bad news. But I find that with most attorneys, not all, but most that I work with, they really appreciate knowing the truth. Because if the opinion is something that they don't want, they can re-strategize. And maybe, I have to tell them, I think your client is lying to you. And I don't want to say that to the client.
Yeah, of course, of course. Are there any red flags that you look out for, or obvious things that this isn't going to work out? I better not accept this engagement. Or if an engagement starts and something happens, are there any specific things that you kind of look out for?
When they're very pushy and trying to press for well, it's really easy. You can see this. Even I can see this. And here, and they try to tell me what to look for in the handwriting. That would be a red flag. Also, if they call up and say, like that first guy did, we're going to court tomorrow and we need you right now. We need your opinion right now. That's not a good thing.
Let's talk a little bit about preparation. How do you get ready for your day in court or for a deposition?
Take a tranquilizer. No,
Take a tranquilizer.
No.
So how do you get ready?
It has evolved over the years. And in fact, yesterday I was in a deposition remote, which is something I really love, even though it's better to be in the courtroom or the arbitration room in this case. But preparing is a little different with remote testimony. One thing that I used to do, because testifying, whether it's in a deposition or a trial or an arbitration, is very stressful. I mean, because it's the opposing attorney's job to make me look stupid. And
Right.
It's my job not to help. And that's, kind of not always easy. So I used to do something called EFT, emotional freedom technique. And you can find lots of YouTubes on it. It's also called tapping, where you're just tapping in places on your head and saying certain things, and it really, really works. Anybody who's nervous, I recommend it.
Outstanding. And beyond getting ready, are there any techniques that you like to use in tense situations in court? If somebody's cross-examining you or grilling you and not giving you enough time to answer the questions, or you misspeak, how do you handle those kind of tense situations in court or depositions?
I mean, first of all, I prepare very well, because I think that's the biggest defense. I want to know what I'm talking about, but I don't take it personally if they attack me. I know, I know it's what they do, but I just stay calm and quiet and expressionless. And then I wait at the end of the question, and I may say, I didn't understand the question. Could you rephrase that? Which often knocks them off balance. But I mean, I mean it. I'm listening to what they say, but I'm not going to answer a question that I don't understand, or that they're putting in a way that's trying to box me into a corner.
You had brought up kind of the differences between remote or telepresence hearings and trials even. How is You mentioned that it's better to be there in person, but it's maybe easier to be, at home doing it from Zoom. Tell me a little bit about that dichotomy. What's different about, in terms of demeanor, in terms of preparation, what's different about telepresence compared to being there in person?
You mean like wearing your pajama bottoms with a suit coat?
That's exactly what I mean.
Yeah. Well, driving downtown Los Angeles from Ventura takes a good, probably at least 2 hours. So that's no fun. And then coming home, it's probably going to be in rush hour. It's always rush hour, but it's just not fun. And you have less time. I have colleagues who charge the same regardless. I don't. I feel like that's really not fair. And so I charge an hourly rate when I'm doing remote testimony. I have a day rate, a flat rate for, going downtown, or distance is a different rate. And demeanor is going to be the same regardless. But I feel more comfortable having notes when I am remote, because they can't see what I'm looking at. And I could have the same notes in front of me in court, but I got accused once by an attorney when I was testifying, she's reading her testimony, which wasn't true. So I just closed the book that I had with my notes, and I testified, completely without being able to refer to anything. And that was fine because I knew what I was talking about.
Let's shift gears a little bit. Do you have any stories about cases that you've been on that either fundamentally change the way that you go about expert witnessing or reinforce something that you were already doing?
I remember being on the witness stand in a criminal hearing during COVID, with the mask, which was really uncomfortable testifying. And some judges would say you could take your mask off and others would not. But anyway, the client was pro per, and it was a criminal case. So he was really, the deck was stacked against him. And the prosecutor was asking me a question, and he was really fumbling it, not doing a good job. And I wanted to say, what I think you mean is, and I had to quickly stop myself and say, it's not your job to help the attorney in cross-examination.
That's a really important point, and it is easy because in your profession you want to help people, you want to talk to people,
Yes,
so it can be
absolutely.
difficult not to fall into that. So you were talking earlier about arbitrations. Is there a difference between any aspect of your job as an expert witness when you're in some sort of alternative dispute resolution like arbitration compared to a typical jury trial, or is it pretty much the same?
For me, it's the same. It doesn't matter what I'm doing. And something else came to mind about what you asked. I think you asked if I had bad experience.
Yeah.
Yes, and I think this is important for anybody who's new. I was going to a deposition that was in Orange County, which is 100 miles from where I live. And I was very clear with my client attorney about what my fee was going to be. But when I got to the attorney's office who was deposing me, apparently he didn't know, and he refused to pay me any more than for 1 hour, which I think at the time, it was a long time ago, it was like $250. So I drove 200 miles, did the thing, and that was, it was a bad experience. And the same thing happened to me when I had to drive to San Diego, and it was the same attorney.
Yeah.
You'd think I would have learned. And I talked to that attorney very strongly about it. But that was a case where I was paid much, it should have been about $2,500, and it was way less than that. And it took me 6 hours to drive home.
I bet you haven't made that mistake since then.
No. And so I would just encourage people to make sure before leaving your office that you know how that you're going to get paid and how you're going to get paid.
Speaking of getting paid, you did mention that you take a retainer. Do you have different rates for things like an expert witness report versus something like a deposition, or is that all just your basic hourly rate?
For depositions, I have I have a minimum fee for 2
Okay.
hours. And then my hourly rate is $100 more than my regular hourly rate, and the
I
same
see.
for court, because it's more stressful.
Absolutely. You've been doing this for a while. Have you noticed any differences in expert witnessing in general since you first began the profession?
Probably not in the process. And that doesn't change. Of course, we've had the issue in the last, since 2010, of handwriting not being taught. And I'm sure that eventually that's going to catch up with us. Yeah,
Sure.
and it's coming back. It's coming back into the schools now. In 27 states now require training in handwriting. That will change things later because of the people who now don't know how to write. And of course,
Yeah.
we now have a lot of digital signatures, which is I don't get into that. I send that to other people.
Sure. Well, with a fairly dynamic field, with laws changing and things changing, how do you stay abreast of the goings on? How do you not only become an expert, but how do you remain an expert in your field?
I think it's important to be a member of a reputable organization, as I am in the Scientific Association of Forensic Examiners, and I've been on the board for quite a few years, and now I'm the ethics chair. So being in an organization of people who are vetted, not everybody is accepted into that group. they do a background check and, a questionnaire. And you have to, I'm pretty sure, I don't do that part, but I'm pretty sure that you have to have recommendations. I'm the president of the American Handwriting Analysis Foundation, and we definitely require 2 professional recommendations. So I think that is important. And also with SAFE, we'll call it, because that's easier than saying Scientific Association of Forensic Examiners. But we have a monthly continuing education program. And the goal is to get all of the people who are new to become certified and professionals. And we have an annual conference online. So I think those you have to keep up your education.
Do these educational opportunities also serve as networking opportunities? You mentioned earlier that sometimes if you get a call about something that's not necessarily right in your wheelhouse, you might pass it off to somebody else. Do you make those sorts of connections at these conferences and in these agencies?
Yes, you certainly can. And it is a lot easier when you have an in-person conference. We haven't done that since COVID, but
Sure.
having the this opportunity online is really good too. We have, for instance, in that organization, SAFE, we have people who are experts in paper and ink, which is something that I would, if somebody calls me about that, then I refer them out. Or somebody has an ESDA machine or a VHC, which are specialized, and I don't have them in my office, but I know somebody who does. So I can ask the client if we can bring that person in.
In your niche, would you say that a large percentage of the business is in referrals?
In my case, that's all, because I don't advertise. But yeah. And of course, now with the internet, as you said, I've been doing this a long time. I've been testifying since 1985. And now it's so much easier for people to find you. Because
Sure.
somebody called me this morning from Alaska. And I said, how did you find me? And he said, I Googled you. And I looked at all of these people on Google, and I decided you were the one that I wanted to talk to. So that makes it easy.
Absolutely. Before we wrap up, do you have any last advice for expert witnesses, and in particular, newer expert witnesses who are just getting started?
Well, my advice is to know your craft, to know what you're doing. And as I said, be honest, be clear, and really do your homework when you're going to testify in any venue.
Absolutely sage advice. Miss Lowe, thank you so much for joining me here today.
Thank you too.
And thank you to our listeners for joining us for another episode of Engaging Experts. Cheers.
Thank you for listening to our podcast, Engaging Experts. Our show notes are available on our website, roundtablegroup.com.